Welcome to Conversations on Modern Slavery. My name is Bryon Lippincott. I'm the head of communications for Free the Slaves, and I co host this podcast with my colleague, Dr. Marta Furlan, the senior program manager for research at Free the Slaves. Conversations on Modern Slavery takes you inside the global fight to end modern slavery. Each episode features engaging conversations with researchers, survivor leaders, frontline advocates, and policy experts, diving into the root causes, the current challenges, and bold solutions driving change. Whether you're new to the issue or deeply involved in the work, this podcast offers fresh insights and powerful stories to inform, inspire, and mobilize. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Kuldeep Singh Chauhan, who is the Asia Regional Director for Free the Slaves, and Ling Li, who is the co-author of Scam, a soon-to-be released book on exploitation in digital scamming centers. Ling and Kuldeep, welcome to Conversations on Modern Slavery.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Bryon.
Ling, can you introduce yourself to our audience? How did you get into this work in terms of researching modern slavery and the exploitation in these scam centers? I think our audience would love to know a little more about you and your work and your background.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Ling Li, and I'm a PhD student in Ca' Foscari University of Venice. And my research topic is actually technology facilitated modern slavery. But before that, I have been working in this field of anti-human trafficking for around 10 years. First as an immigration officer, dealing with cross-border human trafficking cases, then as a researcher and practitioner after I left the law enforcement. And since 2022, I was in Cambodia to do some research project about Cambodian women trafficked to Middle East. But then I suddenly got involved with the Chinese community and got people sending me messages to ask for rescue, and that's how I get to know this human trafficking for forced criminality.
Interesting. Yeah, it seems like it's kind of something that's emerged over the last, I suppose, decade. So to prepare for this episode today, I read your article that you published with your co-authors in the Journal of Critical Asian Studies, which was titled Compound Capitalism, a Political Economy of Southeast Asia's Online Scam Centers. And I found it very interesting how much the structure of these scamming organizations mirrors that of legitimate businesses and legitimate organizations. And I also found a few intersection points with my own experiences living and working in Southeast Asia over the last 10 years and working in the anti-trafficking field. So I guess my first question for you is, your article provides a general history on the growth of these online scam industries and centers prior to the current like epidemic expansion of these schemes. Can you share kind of some of the key points of this history with our audience?
Yeah, sure. So if we really want to understand how we got to today's scam epidemic, we need to go back nearly 30 years. So this industry didn't start in Southeast Asia. It actually has its root in Taiwan in late 1990s. That's when some of the early online fraud techniques were first developed. So like phone scams, lottery fraud, fake price scheme, which often uses new access to phone numbers, personal data, and fake bank account to target victims remotely. But by the early 2000s, as law enforcement in Taiwan became stricter, many of these groups shifted their operation to mainland China. Like provinces like Fujian and especially the county of Anxi become infamous as a scam town. They run large-scale phone and online fraud networks. And these were often, at the beginning, family-based operations, paying workers commissions to lure victims into fake lotteries or like government scams. But again, as a government, the Chinese government ramped up enforcement, these operations needed somewhere else to go. And that's when Southeast Asia came into play. It starts around the early 2010s. So places like Cambodia, the Philippines, Myanmar, and Laos offered weaker regulation, local protection, and existing infrastructures from online gambling operations. So many of the same criminal groups simply transplanted their method into this new setting. So the major turning point was around 2017 to 2019 when Cambodia, especially Sihanoukville, became the epicenter, and largely driven by the Chinese-run online gambling platform. But when Cambodia banned online gambling in 2019, many of those operators just changed the business to full-scale scamming. And since then, we've seen scam compound evolve into large militarized operations with complex organizational structures, recruitment networks that span multiple continents, and protection from the local elites. So yeah, in many ways, it's highly mobile, extremely adaptable industry that has shifted rapidly in response to law enforcement crackdowns and continue to look for new safe places globally.
Thank you. That I mean, I think some of the things that you mentioned about like the history of it with Taiwan and how far back it goes is really interesting to me because I think most of the I've been following like, public discourse on anti-trafficking for, 10 or 15 years now. And we've heard about this just recently as as an exploitation type of thing. So I guess the past criminality aspect is much deeper. But the other thing that you brought up that was interesting was that it shifted a lot due to government responses to the scamming, to the criminality of it. But I think sometimes that gets lost in the current conversations about these things. Government is often painted as failing to address these or incapable of addressing these issues, but the government is actually somehow contributed to forcing them into new territories and forcing them to adapt. Is that an accurate
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
So in your paper, you describe how these companies are set up, the arrangement of the compounds, and the organizational structure of these companies. Can you walk us through some of those descriptions and describe how these scam companies are similar and different to companies conducting legal businesses?
Well, uh, in many ways, this scam compound like they functioning like legal companies. Like so, inside you will find department like human resource, IT, logistic, finance, or even specialized training divisions, and they have manager performance evaluation, quotas, and internal promotion system. And many have like detailed onboarding process where new recruits are trained on scam techniques, scripts, and psychological manipulation strategies. So from the outside, that like organizational chart could almost like resemble a typical call center or a sales company, let's say. But of course, the core difference is the entire foundation of those operations is criminal. So this is our locked compound, often surrounded by barbed wire with private security, armed guards, CCTV, surveillance everywhere. And workers typically work like 14 to 16 hours a day, often with no day off. And unlike legal business, the way they recruit and control labor is based on violence, threats, and debt bondage. And so, and many workers, of course, they are recruited through deception uh, and fake job offers or false promise of legal employment abroad, like the traditional human trafficking cases. And once inside, their passport are confiscated. And if they try to leave or fail to meet the performance target, they may be beaten, sold to another compound, or face increasing debt burden. Um, and in some cases, they are even tortured or used as examples to intimidate others. So while this operation borrows the formal structure of legal business, like departments, workflow, performance management, they combined with forced labor control and physical captivity. That's what makes this model both highly organized and extremely brutal.
So how does the structure that mirrors legal businesses, how does that make it more difficult for law enforcement, for governments to regulate and, capture these different enterprises?
Hmm. So, for example, in Cambodia, you can see a lot of media posts and then also government when the discussions, they're talking about this issue as labor dispute. Um, it's because the scam compound bosses, they are super smart. So when they got a human trafficking victim, they force them to sign a contract. And in the contract, there's specific rules, like how to say that, the sentence saying that they earn certain money for the company, and then they voluntarily enter this company. So
Mm.
and then they also have payroll, like paycheck, these kind of things documented very well, like monthly payment, how much money they use in the compound. And then when we try to rescue some of the victims, they will, so it's, how do you say, they will even make a video of they release the victim, like giving them an empty box and sign a resignment kind of paper, and then record it and send to the law enforcement saying that they leave the company freely and there's no
Mm.
violence. But then there's a car waiting outside of the compound and taking them back also to another compound.
Oh, interesting. So that has to make it very hard to regulate and to enforce the labor laws, criminality laws, all of those things.
Yeah, and then for the law enforcement, they need evidence, right? So the burden of providing this kind of evidence falls on the shoulder of the victim, and then their passports and phones are confiscated, right? So when they even get out of the compound, they don't have evidence of how they were beaten. What it's a illegal to show that it's an illegal activity happening inside. So how the law enforcement can believe that? And the compound boss will just come say, "Oh, it's a call center." So they owe us money.
Because of the international recruitment and all of those costs, what you're saying is the victims are forced to sign that they're going to repay those costs, correct?
Yeah,
Okay. Um, so in your paper, you also described, and you were talking a little bit earlier about the training, like the very structured and detailed training that goes into training people how to operate these scams and to keeping these centers operational. So can you describe this, I guess, the intense and really structured training that is involved in preparing new recruits to conduct scams?
yeah, sure. So the training is very professionalized. It normally lasts anywhere from 1 week up to a month. So during that time, they were told like highly detailed scripts for different scam types, whether it's romance scam, crypto investment fraud, or tax scams. So they practice simulated conversations, rehearse multiple scenarios, and study how to build emotional trust with victims. And a big part of the training focused on psychological manipulation. So how to study the victim's behavior, how to gain their trust, how to create a convincing personality story, a personal story, and eventually how to escalate it to extracting money. And after the training, recruits are assigned to a team. Usually it's about 10 to 12 people led by a team leader. And the team leader acts as both a tutor and a supervisor. I mean, and then their job is to monitor performance, correct mistakes, and most importantly, ensure discipline. So if a worker isn't learned fast enough or is behaving poorly, the team leader reports them to a higher level manager, which can lead to punishment. And the punishment means anything from financial penalties to physical violence and torture.
Wow, that's it sounds like a very intense um process of getting people trained to do that. Is that then also a traumatic experience for the is the training a traumatic experience for the victims as well? Not just for the people being scammed, obviously, that's a traumatic experience to be scammed and emotionally manipulated, but is learning how to manipulate people, do victims f experience that as a traumatic event in their lives, being forced to learn that?
Yeah, we do have many victims talking to us that they really first thought it was a call center job, and when they realize it's a scam, they cannot do it. They don't want to be criminals, but then the beating come, the torture come, and then they also sometimes they torture them and then send the video to their families.
Mm.
And it's mentally and physically torture. So they start to do crimes, but then once they start, they also have the burden of thinking they are criminals and they will never be identified as victim.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly difficult. Um, so in your research, you talk about these, um, you talk about a wide variety of scams that are conducted in these compounds. In general, it seems like with the online scamming industry and within the anti-trafficking, anti-modern slavery sector, we often talk about this as kind of a single type of enterprise. Like online scamming is a general category, but we really never dig into the details of the different types of scams. But you really have a really detailed list of how all these different types of scams play out. Can you describe some of these different types of scams that are used by these companies?
Yeah, sure. I know that a lot of people think online scamming as you as a single type, like a romance scam. Um, but yeah, inside the compound, the whole ecosystem of different scams are quite fascinating, and then they are constantly evolving. That's the main point. And well, I can talk about several major used ones right now. So the most well known is what we call pickpocketing, which combines romance and investment fraud. Um, in this scam, workers build emotional relationship with victims over weeks or even months, slowly convincing them to invest in fake crypto or trading platforms. And once the victim puts in their life savings, the platform disappeared. And then the scammers, of course, also disappeared and move on. And then there are task scams. So victims are recruit to leave positive reviews on products, like leave likes in Amazon, for example. But then, of course, the Amazon website is fake. And they're told that if they want to do access bigger tasks with higher returns, they need to pay a membership fee. And that's where the scammer takes their money. And also another very big problem for the Chinese, I think the Asian nationals, is impersonation scams. So scammers pretend to be law enforcement or government officers, telling victims that they are involved in criminal investigations and need to pay money to prove they're innocent or post bail. So this creates a lot of fear, especially for overseas students or people unfamiliar with the legal system. And there are online business coaching scams. So scammers approach victims promising to teach them how to open online business on platforms like TikTok or how to become an influencer. And victims are pressured to pay high training fee to or buy fake software or service. And another thing, sextortion scams. So scammers lure victims, often men, into explicit video chats, and then the footage is secretly recorded, and victims are then blackmailed with threats to expose the video to family, friends, or employers unless they pay. So the key thing is uh, again, this is highly professionalized and constantly evolving. So when one scam type gets too much attention, or law enforcement start cracking down, like the big pickpocketing, now it doesn't work that much in China because everybody know about it. And then the scammers will quickly change to the next model. And that's part of what makes this industry so difficult to disrupt.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. It was so interesting to read your article, and I'm really interested in seeing your book when it comes out because it there was so many different types of things and so many such an evolution change there that it's fascinating to see how all of that evolves over time. Um, so the other thing that I wanted to ask you about in terms of the working conditions in the compound was you talked quite a bit about the internal compensation structures that are developed within these compounds in terms of how people are getting paid, performance rewards, um, commissions, promotions, and all of these things. And a lot of them sound very legitimate, and they, like, as you were talking about before, in terms of, the legitimate
Mhm.
face of these organizations. But then there's the hidden side as well that's very much a deviation from legitimate companies. And those deviations often v- push people into the slavery like practices, the forced labor, all of that. So can you kind of talk about, like, the schemes that are there, and then how those are used against victims to keep them trapped?
Yeah, so workers usually have daily or weekly quota, and daily quota will be like three. You have to add three more targets and start talking. It's not like hi, hello. You have to have some conversation and get some information from them. And if you meet your target, um, for example, convincing victim to invest a certain amount, you may receive commission bonus and sometimes even promotion to higher position like team leader or trainer. And the higher you rank, the more freedom you may have within the compound. Or uh, I think that the managers they can leave the compound, and they can stay outside. Um, but as I already mentioned, so all of this operate it operates under a constant threat of violence. Um, what people don't see is once they fail to meet the quota and break rules or try to resist, they face the physical punishment, or have the debt increase. So in some cases, people are um, literally treated like commodities, like they are bought and sold between different compounds, depending on their performance or how much ransom they can pay. That's why we say this is a mixed corporate style performance management with modern slavery.
Yeah. So the other thing that you mentioned in there that I thought was really interesting was these compounds actually have their own economy, right? Like, they have their own set of services and all of that. Can you describe, like, the internal economy of these compounds and how that factors into the compensation in terms of debt and how it's held against them?
Oh yeah. So a compound, well, that's the thing. Like there's a different type of scam compound. There are really compound like in hosting 4,000 people, like a mini community, and then there are just a building. So the inside ecosystem will be so different. So the one we're talking about is more like 4,000, 5,000 people compound. And then inside that, there's they have everything like a hospital, post office, um, bank. Well, but the bank is normally like a currency exchange or cryptocurrency bank, and a brothel, restaurants, all kinds, a playing field, a basketball field. Um, so whatever they earn, they have to spend inside the compound, and the price is much more expensive. For a $1 or $2 Coca-Cola outside will be $5 inside. Um, and I mean, and everything is in USD, even though they are in Myanmar or Cambodia. Um, so, but when a recruit, they just come in the compound, they don't have any money, right? And so it just add up to their debt. Whatever they drink, they go to toilet, they use the water, they use the dormitory. It's all add up to them. And then all the like the spends of management fee, property management, I mean, and then protection fees, they all come to the debt of the workers.
So these compounds then are using a very old debt bondage methodology to keep these people in a very modern exploitation scam.
Yeah, that's a very accurate explanation. Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. It's really, I mean, it's very sad to hear how all this plays out, but I think having the more detailed conversations about what it looks like is really important to understanding what's happening and how people can theoretically start to get involved in shifting some of these, addressing some of these issues. My next question was, the other thing that stood out to me in your report was like the relational dynamics between ranks of workers and between cultural backgrounds and the companies, and how companies seem to be very good at dividing people into groups and pitting groups against each other so that nobody really can, so the workers can't unite or unionize or fight back to get out of these compounds.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, they do mix workers from different nationality, language, and background. For example, you might have Chinese, Vietnamese, Ugandan, Bangladesh, all in the same compound, but often separated in small teams where communication is limited. This prevents workers from building solidarity or organizing resistance. And also, the management style inside creates a system of mutual distrust. So workers are often encouraged to inform on each other. And if you report a teammate who is trying to escape or who is trying to hiding money or funds, you may avoid punishment yourself. So this creates a very toxic atmosphere where everyone fears both the boss and their own coworker. And on top of that, management heavily relies on public punishment to instill fear. So if someone tries to escape, underperform, or violate rules, they may be beaten. So I mean, like in front of the entire team or even the whole compound. And this serve as a warning to everyone that, oh, this is what will happen to you if you disobey. And in some of my interviews, survivors even describe witness killing. And this extreme cases send a very, I mean, very clear message that disobedience could cost your life. And this combination of fear, physical violence, isolation, and the psychological pressure is what keeps people trapped, even when they desperately want to leave. Um, but but then from now, like people know more about this the scam compound issue, so we can see there are more and more cases, still very rare, that we got Vietnamese and I think Indian try to build a team by themselves and run together. But I think like last year is 3 cases, but there's hope.
So people are starting to figure out how to connect and work together, to escape these things, but it's still very early in how figuring out how to do that.
Yeah, and it's almost impossible for Chinese because the bosses are Chinese. So
Mm.
the distrust level among the Chinese and Taiwanese are much worse than the other nationalities for sure.
Interesting. Um, so I guess my last question before I turn it over to Kuldeep for some additional questions is more of an academic question. But you describe these scams and scam companies not as not just a human rights violation, but as an expression and implementation of predatory capitalism. Can you explain the difference between the human rights issues present in the compounds, the idea of predatory capitalism, and how these two ideas interact?
Yeah, yeah, of course. I mean, it's clearly a human rights crisis because what we are talking about forced labor, trafficking, torture, even killing, right? But to really understand why this industry has grown so explosively, we need to see it as a very extreme form of predatory capitalism, as what we call in our research compound capitalism. Um, so this model takes traditional elements of capitalist exploitation but combines them in new, very disturbing ways. First, there's what we call the logic of exceptionality. So this compound operates almost like private zones. Again, heavily guarded with barbed wire, armed security, internal policing, and in some ways they resemble like special economic zones where state sovereignty becomes um, outsourced. Yeah, that's the right word. What's ironic is that while these compounds often operate illegally, they are still enabled or at least tolerated by local state actors who provide political protection. And even though workers are physically locked in, they remain fully connected to the outside world through the internet and scamming people globally. And the second thing is the labor control model draws from some very old system. You can compare it to the compound labor regime of South African mine or China's dormitory labor system during its reform period, where workers live where they work, and management controls not only their labor, but also their daily life, movement, and basic needs. So in the scam compound, this control becomes absolute, like worker eat, sleep, and work, and are punished, and within all in the same place. And the third thing is in today's world where people talk a lot about surveillance capitalism. So scam compound actually represent an even more extreme form of behavioral manipulation and data extraction. Big tech companies use algorithm to extract it and monetize user data, right? But scam compound, by contrast, use human labor to extract emotional data. They build trust and addictions through romance, fake relationship, and fake business mentorship. And in both models, the goal is to manipulate behavior for profit. And in that sense, even though scam compounds are still labor intensive, some of their tactics are uncomfortably similar to the legitimate tech platforms. And finally, all the predatory capitalism, the whole system feeds on economic disposition. So many of the workers inside were recruited because they had no real economic alternatives. They are often young, heavily in debt, and come from marginalized communities. And the COVID-19 pandemic made it even worse by shrinking job market and increasing financial desperation. And it makes the whole situation it make it easier for recruiters to target vulnerable groups. So yes, at one level, it's about human rights violation, but at a deeper level, this industry survive because a global system allow this kind of highly profitable, highly adaptable extraction model to operate and to exploit both vulnerable laborers and the vulnerable victims, scam victims at the same time.
That's really interesting. It feels like after reading your paper, and like I said, I'm really interested to read your book. Um, like this is kind of the extreme edge of maximizing, like harvesting profit. Like these compounds are essentially waiting for people to have normal people to have accrued some form of wealth, and then they're using emotional manipulation, fake relationships, technology to essentially extract and harvest that wealth from an unsuspecting population.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then when we talk about human trafficking victims, normally it's a physical exploitation, but here is also like a data exploitation, if I can say that. When they come into the scan compound, they steal all the information from their phone. They take all the bank account details, and then they also sometimes ask them to be a money laundering mule, so using their personal information to get more like SIM card and then bank account, and just help them to wash money. So it's just extreme form of capitalism.
Yeah. That's terrifying, and I think the other thing that is talked about some with this that's very interesting is the people who are vulnerable to being trapped in these scams is different than with some of your other forms of conventional forced labor in terms of, like, your brick kilns or agriculture, mining, some of those things. The economic and educational demographic is quite different.
It's yes and no. We do see people with bachelor degrees or even PhD got sold into the compound, and that is often from South Asian, like India or like African countries, because well, we have a kind of theory of because they are using this way of paying the agent and find a job abroad, and normally they have a certain degree of education. But then for the people in South Asia and in China, it's actually quite similar to what we see as for the victims of a traditional type of human trafficking. They are low education, low age, and do not have a lot of skills. So I think that's also because it's easy to cross a border, and there's no skill, no paperwork required. So we did some research for the Chinese nationals and also Vietnamese nationals, and then that's the pattern and profile of the victim are exactly the same as the one before, except there are more male victims than female victims.
Okay, interesting. Well, thank you so much for clearing that up because I think the narrative I often hear is that this is a much a higher economic level or a higher education level, but it's interesting to know that that's only the case in some places, in some demographics and some areas, but it's not universal. So thank you for that. That was really helpful. I'm gonna turn to my colleague Kuldeep, who has a bunch more questions that he would love to ask.
Thank you
Kuldeep?
so much, Brian.
Mhm.
Link. So, your new book, Scam, takes us deep into the world of Southeast Asia's cybercrime compounds. Would you please like to speak a little bit about your book? And was there anything you came across in your research for the book that really surprised you or challenged how you originally understood these operations?
Yeah, and that's a very good question. I think during my whole research, everything is like unexpected. It's quite a new, but then the thing really struck me was just how sophisticated the entire ecosystem behind this operation has become. It's far beyond what many people imagine when they hear the word scam. So what I mean is this compound do not operate in isolation. They are supported by a highly developed illicit infrastructure. So, for example, they can easily purchase personal data on the black market, things like phone numbers, ID cards, bank accounts, travel histories, even victims' social media profiles, right, photos. And this allows the scammers to personalize their approach and build very convincing emotional connections with their target, which make it much harder for victim to detect the fraud. And on top of that, there are increasing using of technology, AI tools. So we are seeing AI-powered chatbots that can manage multiple victims at once, voice cloning that allows scammers to create fake phones of video calls, and even face swapping technology to generate highly convincing fake profile. And as these tools become cheaper and more available, the scams become more scalable, more automated, and harder to identify. And in a way, these operations are evolving into a hybrid model that combines cybercrime, behavioral manipulation, and big data exploitation, right? So they collect enormous amount of personal information and analyze what works and constantly refine their scripts to target people even more effectively. And that is so scary. And what it even make it scarier is that law enforcement and NGO often do not have the up-to-date knowledge, tools, or resource to keep up with these fast-growing operations. And many agencies are still using framework that were built for older form of human trafficking or financial crime, which I'm not saying that those kind of crimes are not important. It just like we have to update all the time, and because the criminals are rapidly adopting new technologies and methods that makes the gap even wider, right? So that's that's a very alarming aspect. It's how technology is moving so fast than our ability to respond.
Okay, that's really concerning, Ling, and surprising to hear that so much technological angle and constant evolution is happening. So, you spoke about these technologies used in scam centers leveraging things like AI, encrypted apps, or dark web tools. So, what kind of challenges does this pose for people trying to investigate or shut them down?
Hmm. Yeah. It's well, the first thing is like the encrypted platforms like telegrams or like private forums. It allows the network to operate across border, right, with almost a complete secrecy. And I mean, right now it's the recruitment, money laundering, and I mean, money transfer management instructions. Much of these coordinations now happen in these platforms, where police have very limited visibility. And then it's a use of cryptocurrency. Um, so especially like a stable coins like Tether allows money to move instantly across jurisdiction while leaving very little traditional paper trail. So funds are often passed through multiple wallets, mixed with other transactions and cashed out in different countries, which makes the tracking profits extremely challenging even for experienced financial investigators.
Mm.
And then the AI tools, as I already mentioned, I won't repeat here, but at the same time, that the traditional legal tools what we have, like national jurisdictions, physical raids, were built for crimes that happens in clear place, involving like identifiable actors. But here we are dealing with decentralized multi-jurisdiction network where the real perpetrator can hide behind layers of digital infrastructure. So that's why we are in multiple papers we are calling for law enforcement globally to have a whole new model of international cooperation, real-time intelligence sharing, and better capacity to trace digital finance flow across multiple countries.
Okay. Uh, Ling, moving on to the human side, you have spoken to survivors, traffickers, and even law enforcement officials during your research paper and also before writing the book. Was there a particular conversation or moment that really stuck with you? Something that made you stop and think differently about the human side of this crisis?
Mm, I think one of the biggest emotional and legal conflicts I found um, through the year is it's the forced criminality element of the people. Let me elaborate. So they're trafficked into the compound, forced to carry out scams under threat of violence, as we already speak. But at the same time, they are the ones doing the crimes, right? And this creates huge problem both for law enforcement and public perception. Many police agencies, um, even some international frameworks, so struggle to classify them as victim because they are also involved in criminal activity. They worry if we call those people victims of human trafficking or forced criminality, whatever. What about the people who lost their life or life saving on the other hand end of the scam? And I mean, in the media, public narrative often blame these workers entirely, calling them scammers rather than recognize how they were lured into these roles. It's very different. I have been working in this field for a long time, and before I was dealing with bride trafficking, um, child sexual exploitation. Those victims, they do get a sympathy from the public, but this new type, no, absolutely not. And this is part of why the reporting rate of those victims are extremely low. Many victims feel ashamed of what they were forced to do. Even when they escape, they fear they will be treated as criminal instead of getting protection, which the fear is accurate because there are so many cases you can find in Thailand and China. They were sent to jail for what they did, regardless of whether they are trafficked or not. And so we can see victims are detained, prosecuted, or deported rather than assisted. And what makes it more complicated is the truly transnational nature of the crime. So you might have a victim from country A recruited by a trafficker from country B, sold into a compound in country C, and then forced to scam people in country B. That means that the crime and then any possible justice is spread across 4 or more jurisdictions. And in that environment, both scam victims and trafficking victims often have no real pathway to justice. Just before talking to you, I was talking with a victim from Zimbabwe, and then recruited by a trafficker from Dubai, and then trapped in Cambodia, and then he lost everything to the scammers take all his life saving, and then he asked me, "Can I put my trafficker in jail and get some compensation?" I say, I don't know. I even don't know where to start to help. But meanwhile, the real perpetrator, the owner, the brokers, the money launderers stay invisible and protected. So the heart of this issue is a legal and moral blind spot, I guess. How do we deal with victims who were also forced to commit crime? That's the central question. And right now, many systems still aren't equipped to answer this question.
Yes. Ling, you have highlighted before how global inequalities play a big role in making people vulnerable to trafficking on both the victim and consumer side. Can you break that down for us? How do economic pressures around the world end up feeding these scam compounds?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for this question. So, I mean, poverty and then lack of employment opportunities in people's home countries always play a very central role in the crime of human trafficking, right? Many of the workers who end up inside a scam compound are simply looking for um, any kind of stable income. So it is not random, let's say, that industry exploded after COVID-19. So many people, especially the already vulnerable groups, often face really low wage, a limited career path, and family debts, or local economy that do not offer a viable future. So when a recruiter can offering high paying job abroad, and then I want to also talk about this, like there's a lot of article talking about it's like really highly paid job and then they are greedy. No, it's not. Like we take a lot of evidence from the victims, and the offer they got is it's normal. Like if you are a construction worker getting $50, you are slightly getting paid better, like in Cambodia, maybe saying 70, and then they move, and then it's a scam job. So they're not greedy. I want to just say that for the victims. And even if the offer sounds too good to be true, people are willing to take risks simply because they had no better alternatives. So, I mean, the scam industry just feeds directly on that desperation. And but beyond the COVID itself, the growth of the industry also reflects a failure in global platform governance and labor oversight. Many of these job offers were advertised openly on major social media platforms and online job boards, and tech companies did very little to vet or remove suspicious recruitment ads. If a construction work, the job salary is $3,000, come on, you know it's fake. You can do something. So we have cases even after trafficking reports start to emerge. The job are still there. And at the same time, labor unions and worker protection often did not have the tools or to monitor this cross-border digital recruitment network. This leaving the vulnerable workers exposed. And at the same time, labor unions and they do not have the capacity, right? So as a result, the workers fall into this trap before anyone even realized what's happening. So if we want the systematic change, we cannot just focus on poverty reduction alone. We also need real accountability from tech companies that host job ads and scams, stronger financial regulations that tracks illicit money, and much better collaboration across borders so that this criminal network do not keep exploiting the legal gaps between countries.
Mhm. For folks on the front lines, linked like activists, NGOs like Free the Slaves, and even law enforcement, what's one approach you think really works? How can they balance the urgent need to rescue people now with building systems that stop this from happening in the first place?
Really, thank you for this question again. And if I had to give one practical recommendation for those NGOs, activists, it would be to center survivor-led network as part of both rescue and prevention work. Um, Survivors, they are often the ones who understand the recruitment network. They know their brokers, and they also know the actual condition inside this compound better than anyone else. They know where recruitment is happening, how broker operate, and what kinds of promises are being made, right? So, but too often, survivors aren't included in policymaking or early warning system. So I I write also papers about empowering survivor voice, not just a victim, but as an active partner that would make the intervention much more informed and effective. But right now, like we're just not doing it. Like the tech companies sometimes have meetings with law enforcement, and have a nice MOU signed, but then there's no survivor voice. I don't know what they're talking on. And at the same time, so it's critical that we balance short-term rescue effort with long-term prevention. There's a lot of raids happening. You can see from the media, but raids can free people. But if we don't address the recruitment pipeline and the compound simply refill with new victims, so prevention means working at multiple levels, right? So better financial regulation again, tech platform accountability, stronger labor monitoring, and economic developments that offer people better chance, better opportunities, so they do not join into these fake job offers in the first place. Um, but then this kind of effort is nowhere to see, at least by now. And we have been like trying to push it to work, but still no. And finally, I think we also need to be careful about not creating a good victim and back to victim narrative.
Yes.
So yeah, again, there's a victim and the perpetrator overlap, but that then, I mean, the risk originally they take risky jobs and or like do something across the legal line that doesn't erase the violence and then trafficking that happened to them. So we have to realize the complicity and acknowledge that and find a solution based on that, but not just turn a blind eye. How do you say that in English? Yeah. So anyway, so for the activist and the organization, it's about building system that both respond faster to rescue those in immediate danger, but also tackles the structure driver, that allows this industry to keep recruiting and expanding.
Okay. Ling, the concluding question from me is related to this. As someone who's an expert and who's really dived deep into this issue, if you had to make a call to action, what's the one thing you think governments, tech companies, or the public need to do right now to disrupt these operations? And what impact do you hope your book and your work can make in that direction?
Yeah, I do have difficulty to answer this question because I guess one I have to choose. Um, I think the most urgent thing is after the U.S. aid uh, fund cut, um, there's really little resource for us to do anything in the field. So now the rescue, the aftercare, the prevention protection, everything stopped. At least in Cambodia. So first thing, yes, is really calling uh, to have some international attention and also international community to help the NGOs or volunteer groups to keep operating because it's really a survivor problem for those who try to help. And then if we can talk about the longer term, then it's about disrupt the financial flow that keep the industry alive. Um, these operations, as we talk about, is like company alike. It survived because they're profitable. And right now, the combination of cryptocurrency, shadow bank, shell companies, offshore platforms make it extremely difficult to trace where the money goes. And without cutting off the money, um, it's not possible to stop the scam compound, and then it's not possible to stop them to recruiting people. We do talk very interesting discussion with the AI scholar team. They say, oh, it's possible that the human trafficking part can be decreased because now with the AI tools, maybe it can replace largely the labors. But I told them no, because the labor they are extracting, yeah, the workforce, but then also they are demanding the ransom from the family. They treating them as goods. So even though they cannot do scam, they still can get per person 10,000 to $40,000 as ransom. So it will still keep this business going. Um, that's why I know I talk a lot about technology part, financial part in this podcast rather than the human part. It's not I don't care about the human part. It's just like the logic behind it is they want to make money, a lot of money. So we have to do it also with technology and then cutting the money flow.
Okay. So, Link, finally, when is your book Scam Inside Southeast Asia Cyber Crime Compounds coming out? And where can our listeners get a copy if they want to explore the issue more deeply?
Yeah, so it will be out on 8th of July, and by Versos, publisher is our publisher, and then it will be a global distribution. So it really depends on the bookstore whether they will take it, but then you can also get it from Amazon.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Ling, for your insightful answers to my questions. Over to you, Brian.
Thank you so much, Kuldeep and Ling, for unpacking more of the human aspects of this, I guess, this epidemic. I think it really provides motivation that we need to figure out how to unite the movement against modern slavery, to really figure out what can be done with these and to fund interventions toward this. So thank you so much for that. Ling, I believe that is all the questions that we had prepared for this conversation. Is there anything that we've missed that you would like to share or discuss?
No. That's quite in depth. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Well, so my final quick question then is, if our listeners want to follow your work as you're continuing on this journey with, you know, working with human trafficking, modern slavery, your research, what is the best place for them to connect with you?
They can reach out to me through LinkedIn.
Okay, I'll publish your LinkedIn or link with the episode so people can find you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Ling, for this really enlightening conversation about a very difficult topic. And hopefully many of our listeners will go find your book and educate themselves more about these compounds and what can be done to address this topic.
Thank you.
All right, so that wraps up this episode of Conversations on Modern Slavery. As always, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, you can subscribe on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, or on Spotify, and we'd love to have you tune into our next episode as well. So thank you for listening, and we hope you have a great day.